a candle is a wonderful symbol of presence and intentionality. So as I light this candle, I invite you to bring your intentionality to be here with open hearts with one another and in the presence of God.
So much to be consoled as to console.
Let's pray together. Beloved our God, we thank you for the radiant light of your presence, Christ with us, within us, among us and radiating through us, warming our hearts, guiding our minds, and inviting us into greater truth, justice and mercy. We come to thank you for the prophetic light of our brother, friend and mentor, Fr Albert Nolan. And we come together as a community of the Spirit to celebrate what his life has meant to each one of us. So we open our hearts to you and to one another in this beautiful community of people, in this time of sacred remembrance. Amen.
Thank you, Sharon, for the lovely prayer. We hope that Albert Nolan, who was once awarded by ex-President Thabo Mbeki in 2003 for lifelong dedication to the struggle for democracy, human rights, and justice. Make sure you get the books for your family, friends, relatives, and even for your enemies. Send them. Send them. Gerard West is our keynote today. Reading the book, What Triggered Me, What I Learned That I Didn't Know Before. Welcome, Gerard West. The podium is yours. Let's give him a round of applause.
It's wonderful to be here. So thank you for this honor to be able to say something about Albert and something about this remarkable book, which I received in my hand today. And I've been reading the electronic version up until this moment, which itself is fascinating because you can put in phrases to search and track them through the book. Now the book does that rather well through its index. So I encourage those of you who want to read across the different contributions to do that. It's a remarkable gathering of resources. See, judge, act. See reality, particularly from the perspective of the poor and marginalized. Judge that reality using the liberation trajectory of the God of life in Scripture, and use those resources to act to change that reality. And then you start again. See, judge, act. Albert Nolan may have been a reluctant prophet in the sense in which he himself uses the phrase, and in which the phrase is elaborated by Mike Deeb in his introduction. And in his introduction, he mentions Albert's referring to himself as a reluctant prophet. However, my work with Albert through more than 30 years testifies to Albert as faithful to the prophetic process, in the sense in which prophetic is used in the Kairos document. Let me explain briefly. I met Albert in the late 1980s when he worked with the ICT, the Institute for Contextual Theology. Our work together usually took the form of workshops, all kinds of workshops, involving a few church leaders, but made up most fully of community-based and NGO-based activists. Every workshop was structured by the See, Judge, Act process. This book includes many reflections on the place of the See, Judge, Act process in Albert's life and work. Have a look at the index. Here I want to point to a connection evident in the book between the See, Judge, Act process and people's theology. The See, Judge, Act process and people's theology. In seeing reality from below, see, we were not only seeing sociology, we were also seeing theology. the lived theology that the Kairos document in the 1986 revised second edition in a footnote refers to as people's theology. It's well worth reading the footnotes in the second edition of the Kairos document, because that explains some of what is going on behind both the 85 and the 86 edition of it. It was both lived reality and lived theology that were then brought into dialogue through the Judge movement of See Judge Act with a liberation theology-like reading of Scripture. Rereading Scripture within its liberation trajectory offered further resources to people's theology for it to become prophetic theology. And this is explained in that footnote in the second edition. Prophetic theology always, Albert would insist, begins as people's theology. The socially engaged theologian serves not only the people's experience of reality, but also the people's embodied theology. And this is evident in so many of the contributions in this book. Most emphasize the lived reality, Albert connecting with people, but I want to emphasize he connected with people's theology, the embodied theology that was only semi-articulate, perhaps, for most. The Judge movement in the See Judge Act process is precisely this movement from people's theology to forms of prophetic theology, with which to act to change the lived reality of the oppressed. See Judge Act is the doing of theology, the doing of theology. We have perhaps forgotten how radical this was. I think we have definitely forgotten how radical this was. No wonder the Kairos document, generated by See Judge Act processes, received such an ambivalent response. And even today, I think people struggle with it. I can remember being with Graham and Jim Cochran in Brazil, and us talking about the Kairos document's understanding of theology as not one, but three, of the church as a site of struggle. And hardened liberation theologians said, no, you can't speak of the church like that. You can't speak of theology like that. It was a remarkable doing of theology, deconstructing so much that we'd grown up with. My brief for this keynote reflection is firstly, as Sister has said, the question of what triggered me as I read the book. This is what triggered me. See, Judge, Act. Shared across many of the contributions. The summons Albert embodied to do theology again and again and again. See Judge Act, see Judge Act, see Judge Act. The assumption, of course, which we need to remember now, I think, what we knew to be a reality, that the theologies we had in our churches, church theology, the Kairos document called church theology, were products of their own particular socio-historical contexts, and so often were not useful in the particular context of the struggle against apartheid then. This brings me to the second question given to me for this reflection. What have I learned in reading this book that I did not know before? This is a more challenging question. I returned to See Judge Act, but perhaps differently. What struck me as I read through the book, particularly in the more personal contributions, is how Albert's personal lived spirituality of See Judge Act has been taken up by others as a form of their own personal spirituality. This I found fascinating. He certainly had this impact on me, that it took some time before I could return to some notion of personal spirituality in my own life. Given the dangers of this kind of spirituality described in the Kairos document's depiction of church theology, which I had encountered firsthand when I was asked to leave my church in 1983 as a young pastor. When I did return to take up more personal spirituality, prompted in part by robust discussions with Albert about his book, Jesus Today, A Spirituality of Radical Freedom, while he was based here at Emapetlweni, it was the See Judge Act process that has given shape to my daily spirituality. I should perhaps apologize now to Albert. We gave him a hard time when he first shared this new book of his on spirituality. I remember him coming to the university, and we thought, Albert, have you betrayed us? You know, this is so personal, you know. But it was a moment also for us to reflect, and I have done a great deal of that in more recent years. I was therefore delighted to read of similar journeys for so many others who worked with Albert. I want to read and reread these contributions about these notions of spirituality. While I yearn for a return to robust forms of See Judge Act in our context, consistently doing theology again and again for our shifting contexts, I also yearn for a form of See Judge Act spirituality within myself and in the churches. A form of spirituality embodied by Albert. See Judge Act. See Judge Act. The process is relentless. The struggle, as we say, I hope some of us still say this, the struggle, as we say, continues. Phew, thank goodness. But as we have been taught by our colleagues in the Brazilian SEBI Bible movement, and I acknowledge my colleague Paulo Eti here, we also need to recognize moments of pause in the process of See Judge Act. See Judge Act. See Judge Act. See Judge Act. Celebrate. Celebrating moments of acting that has brought about change before we again start the process of See Judge Act. Beautiful. See Judge Act. Celebrate. Reflecting on Albert Nolan's life and work, acknowledged, analyzed, and celebrated in this book, is a worthy moment to pause in our struggle to celebrate. Thank you.
See Judge Act. Okay. Thank you so much, Gerard.
We could just go and break up into a workshop right now.
Yes.
It's like the old days.
Yes. And please, what you've heard from Gerard, keep it in your mind. Just think of yourself, what triggered you as he was speaking about See Judge Act. But because we'll get to a moment where we'll have to share questions and reflections on all that. Our next speaker that I'm going to introduce now is Joe Puri. Now he's going to talk about the significance of Albert's legacy for the church in South Africa. Father Joe Puri is the president at St. Joseph Citadel. So welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as the topic for my reflection this evening says, the significance of Albert Nolan in the church in South Africa. I come from formation background, and that's how I met Albert Nolan at Sidara when I was a student. And then going through the book, which of course was a gift to me, I realized that what I can bring to you is just that aspect. Because the book, as some of you have seen, has a lot of scholars, friends who have written about him. So I was wondering, really, what would I say about the church, his role in the church? Three things came to my mind as I was thinking about him. The first is, which again is all over the book, is coming from the context of formation and also from theological training at Sidara, and I'm thinking, what can we learn from Albert? Number one is, you cannot choose. When you are faced with a reality, with the poor, with suffering, choosing to side with the poor and the suffering is not an option. For me, it comes throughout the book, his life and his interaction with us at the Institute, as a theologian, of course, but more as a formatter. Again, together with other Dominican students, we are being formed at St. Joseph. And at the time when apartheid was at its peak, this is where he contributed. He made people realize, through what people have said, his methods, that when you are in a context where people are suffering, where people are marginalized, where people are oppressed, you cannot choose to be on the fence. You have to be involved. And so, going forward, I think that's what I learned. He inspires a sense of being driven to be involved, to make sure that our theologies are not just theologies that do not touch the reality of the people. They must inspire us to be people of justice, getting involved in society to uplift others. The second part, again, as a fomenter himself, and what I think is good for those of us who are involved in formation, is to encourage ourselves and others to be compassionate ministers, wherever we are. And certainly, for me, that is what I learned from him, and hopefully he challenges us, especially this modern time. So what is compassion? From what I saw, from what he was teaching, from what he imparted on us, I think formation is to be concerned with the suffering of others, accompanied by the urge to help, to do something where we find ourselves. So to be compassionate, for me, what I think I learned is seeing him is to go where suffering is. It means to have this capacity to enter into places of pain, to share the brokenness of humanity, to be with those who are hurting. It evokes a sense of this social responsibility to contribute to the well-being of others in the society. So to have this interest in the social well-being. And certainly throughout his book, being underground, certainly that was part of his ministry, to be involved in society so that others are uplifted. I think, therefore, we as ministers, wherever we find ourselves, we need to have this sense of being with the broken, to share in their pain. The third point that I think I learned, and it comes out throughout the book, is his humility. As a necessary condition for building consensus with others. Certainly his work to work with the different groups in the church, as we have heard, and him being such a scholar working with us as students, he listened to us. He tolerated our ideas, who are not even refined, but he listened to us. And I think it's good. Now the church is on the channel of synodality, and I think we as ministers, we need to have an open mind to be able to listen to the voice of others. And that takes humility. Because when the mind is filled up with your own ideas, you cannot listen to the ideas of others. And certainly, that's what I learned from this great man, to be humble, to respect the voice of others. No matter how intelligent we are, no matter how wise we are, we must keep in mind that we don't have it all. There is still time to learn from others. And certainly for the sake of ecumenism, certainly for the sake of multiculturalism, certainly for the sake of unity, we can learn to be humble, as Albert was, and just to listen to one another. And finally, what do you do? If we don't change, then we are doomed. And that's my prayer for all of us who have come to this important day, that hopefully, as we read the tributes that so many people have written, within ourselves, we will be convinced of these three things. There are many lessons, but just to add to those many lessons in the book, these three things. Choose to side with the poor, be compassionate, and always remain humble. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Joe. And what I like most is that you also encouraged our visitors, our friends and relatives, that each one, of course, is going to get a book, so that what we have talked about, it's there and it will keep on working on you through lifelong. Now I'm going to call Brother Denis Philipe. He's going to share with us the editing process.
My role is to look at the same book from a different aspect of the production of this book. The title we heard is The Reluctant Prophet. And we struggled to find the title. I think we found the right one, because immediately it gives a certain touch to this book. But we could say those who produced the book also did it reluctantly, because we were very busy, and without the pressure of Hilary Carpenter, the publisher in Australia, I'm not too sure that it would have come out the same way and so quickly. I must say a special word of my brother Mike, who is here, who has really worked enormously, basically full-time for several months. The other two is Mark James and myself. And the nice thing, we've been like a fellowship all those months, working together, exchanging emails, WhatsApp. We had a little workshop here to put things together, and you name it. And going through hard times sometimes. So it's a collective work, and it's quite nice that three Dominican brothers work together to celebrate another Dominican brother, isn't it? And I think we can say that about the book. Now, I cannot help being an historian when I speak, because that's my frame of mind. And I would like to say that Albert, precisely because he was reluctant to speak about himself, to put himself forward, he was a lot in the background, even when he was in charge. So he would not have been terribly happy that people celebrate him this way. He said, no, let's talk about something else. There was also something more important than himself, in that sense. So he didn't want for somebody to write his biography. More than once, I've gone to him to interview him for this project, that project. He agreed, but just about. He didn't want to be celebrated. Now, as I put in the conclusion, we ignored that and produced this book. And if you read it, and I hope you will see that it's a biography with 70 voices. 70 people added their little stone to the wall of his biography. Isn't that interesting? And the work of the editorial team was precisely to put it together. It was not easy, because it was going all over the place, and we spent a lot of time to create big categories, to cluster the different chapters, and also to find an appropriate title which captured the imagination immediately. So all the title has been crafted with a lot of care. And if you read the book, I hope you will agree with me that those titles invite you to read the 70 different chapters. I'll go quickly through the different categories to show you that it's really a survey of Albert's life, which has never been done before. It's really new, literally from birth to death. The first part is the early years, and fortunately, Albert's sister is still alive. Virginia Swagenthal interviewed her, and we have a unique testimony on Albert as a child, as a young person, when he worked at the Standard Bank. Who knows that? Very few. I knew a little bit, but not all that. And then there are his years as a student when he joined the Dominican order, when he was a student in Rome and Stellenbosch, when he started to be a parish priest for a short while, and also started to be a chaplain. And Joe Faulkner is here, wrote one of the section of chapters of this section. As an historian, I'm so glad he's there. Then the second part is as a student chaplain, and then Gerald, as indirectly, I refer to that because you spoke, we heard it very well, you put a lot of emphasis, See Judge Act, it comes from that period. And Albert, a key part of his life from the late 60s in Stellenbosch, then he became national chaplain of the National CFS, and then he created another organization, Young Christian Student, YCS, and in fact Mike was part of that. So all those years, I was one of those who made of this movement of young students, initially white, then white and black, a key actor of social change in our country. Because if we manage to overcome apartheid, it's because there's been a social movement, which started, I would say, a little bit in the early 60s, but most strongly late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And Albert was a key component of this collective movement. And because he was a good thinker, and I think it has been said before, Albert has an extraordinary gift of making complicated things simple. That's why he was so effective, because people, at those workshops that Gerald spoke about, people understood. Yeah. Which is not always the case with academics, isn't it? Third one is Mayfair. Maybe not everybody knows Mayfair. It was a grey area in Johannesburg, not really black, not really white, something in between, where the Dominicans some Dominicans, not all of them, chose to live in a very poor lifestyle. Joe was one of them, actually. And myself, I never lived there, but I visited quite a few times, and I was completely impressed. So much so that I was not born in this country, I decided to stay, partly because of Mayfair, I can tell you. It was really remarkable. And it was Albert's idea, actually. He was a provincial, we call that Vicar General, with the state like the provincial, if you like, the head of the Dominicans. And he didn't go there immediately himself, but he encouraged and allowed small groups to start this particular community, which had an impact worldwide. I insist, worldwide. People from all over the world came there and met not only Albert, the other brothers, and YCS, Justice and Peace, you name it. So that period is well documented in the book. I speak of the 1980s. Then, alongside that, Albert became one of the key persons in ICT, Institute for Contextual Theology, ICT that Gerald also referred to, which was a continuation of the Christian Institute of Bayeux-Node in a different way, and has also been extremely effective, because it was another way of doing theology, a theology not universal, not in the sky, but what we also call contextual. And Albert was, again, one out of many. Frank Chicane, for example, was an important person, and so many. I cannot name them all. But he was very important in terms of putting things together, making things work. All those workshops, all those publications, and particularly the Chaos document. He was not the author of the Chaos document, but he was the compiler of the Chaos document. So that is well explained in the book. At the same time, clandestinely, he was a member of the ANC and played a role of facilitating the escape of some people, bringing money, conveying information, so much so that in 1986, the second state of emergency, he was tipped about the imminent arrest of many people. He managed to go into hiding in Johannesburg, and I know he also was in hiding in Cape Town, because I heard it myself from other sources. This is something which few people know about, because Albert never spoke about it. As a matter of principle, he didn't. So many people were in the struggle. They keep talking about it, even if it's half true, or a third true, or a quarter true, or 5% true, in order to get jobs and a lot of money. Albert is the extreme opposite to all the people who use their struggled credentials to get advantages. He does not use them. He actually didn't get money and those things. So that in itself, I think, is important. And it is, when you read the book, you will understand that. So his character, his attitude to those things is quite prophetic, in fact, in that sense. The next one, we decided to create a section with a number, I won't go into that, but theological debate. There are people who have been debating with him about various things. Not that everybody agreed with him, not at all. But that was not the point. He created a space for debate, he was prepared to listen and to respond. So that section put that together, and it's quite interesting. It shows Albert, in a way, from a different angle. As much as if you are here, we're full of praise for him, but look, he was like a theologian like many others. He was part of a community of theologians. Then came famous speech of de Klerk, banning the ANC, started negotiation in February 1990. Then, like everybody, Albert has to recycle himself. And I would say, and Albert took up the challenge of reinventing himself. And some of you here have been part of this, the book club. And we heard the word spirituality, for example. That's part of not the same Albert, but he took seriously the idea of contextual theology. So the context is changing, I change. That's so important. He did exactly that. He first did that as an editor of Challenge. Then when he was here, he was a formatter, he was a student master. Then he had this book club, a sort of forum of spirituality, and the same in Joburg. And then the last part of the book is when, he was caught up by age and he became frail. He went to Boksburg at Mayon House, first as a chaplain, then he couldn't do it. Then he had a stick, then a walker. And there's a beautiful chapter of one of the sisters there. She collected testimonies of all people and all sisters in this institution about Albert the very last years of his life. So we go from birth to death. So the process, as I said, has been quite enriching for the three of us. And I must pay tribute to Hilary Carpenter, the publisher. It's a bit my weakness, but I've produced many books in my life. But I've never seen a publisher like Hilary, who is at the same time a publisher, an organizer, a writer in some way. He was very active in the process. Also recognize Hilary is not here today, he's back to Australia. But I mean, the main person is obviously Mike, and I'm glad he's here, and you must go and congratulate him privately when you've got the time.
Now we're going to go to questions and comments. What's in your mind? What's your comment? What's your question?
I'm John Clark, and I just wanted to just reflect on one thing. I was a student leader at Natal University in Durban. I was very involved ecumenically with other students and various issues, and I remember saying I wanted Albert to come and speak at our group, and he spoke on the parable of the mustard seed. I'd heard him speak at a NCFS conference, but it made such an impact on me. I said, I want you to give it to all my Protestant and evangelical and other friends. And he gave that basic sermon and an input. That was 45 years ago. And I just have seen those mustard seeds, those tiny seeds blooming all over, thanks to him. And seeing this book, 70 contributors, it's been a huge privilege. That's why I drove all the way down here, because I said I just wanted to rekindle that sense of that faith that he instilled in me 45 years ago.
A small thing. I think I forgot to speak about the photographs in the book. And Mark James, one of our brothers, is not here at the moment, in Swaziland, spent a lot of time to collect them and put them together. And I think that this will give more value to the book for the photographs.
Now for the joke.
It's about Hilary Regan, who really conceived of this book right at the beginning, the Australian publisher. And I thought that after having 70 articles in that book, as Philippe pointed out. Mine would probably go on to what's next he's going to publish. Forget about Albert, that's done, as it were. Before he left here to fly back to Australia, he asked me, please, Joe, write another article on Albert, I want to know more.
He didn't know, and the other person didn't know. Our first, what was the Minister of Intelligence, Ronnie Kestrel. So there was a short, a very narrow passage going to the place where we had Eucharist. And we didn't know who was going to come. It was Johnny Kestrel. And he invited him, and he sat down, and Albert was talking about what I can't remember. But then he said, Johnny, you are born in that country, or whatever it was. Please tell us something about it. And Kestrel got up, and he had a wonderful explanation of many things that Albert had touched on, but he could elaborate because he had personal experience about it. It was a wonderful situation. I will never forget it.
Welcome, Father Mike Deeb. Now he's going to do the vote of thanks. Thank you.
So my task is just to wrap up in some ways with a vote of thanks to so many people for the production of this book and for the wonderful event that we have in here today to celebrate it. The publisher Hilary, Regan, my co-editors, especially Philippe and Mark James, Terence Creamer. Then I'd like to thank Sister Valentine, Sharon, Father Joe Perry, Gerald. Sister Celia will speak soon to close off with a prayer and extinguishing the candle here. John Clark, who he filmed the whole launch in Johannesburg, which was the first launch. He produced a beautiful edit of that. I don't know, hopefully you will all manage to get a hold of that edit. Brother Jacob. The community here in Emma Perthuenia. I'd like to thank Father Walter, the prior, our brother Neil, our brother Donald. I'd like to make a big vote of thanks for all the contributors. And several of them are in the room. So I'd like all of those that contributed, please to stand up so we can all recognize them. So we have Graham Lindiger, we have Marilyn Aitken, we have Cecilia Smith, we have Gerald, we have Francis Zita, we have Joe, we have Sharon, Philippe, myself. So thanks very much to all you contributors for your patience and for your enthusiasm and willingness to do what you've done. And finally, I'd like to express a deep thanks to our brother Albert. Some of you know that I'm busy writing my memoirs at the moment, and I couldn't but mention how probably Albert was the biggest single influence in my own life. In fact, he had agreed to write the foreword, but he never lived to do that, unfortunately. Albert, thank you for bringing us all together here today. Thank you for inspiring us, and thank you for continuing to help us to realize that we can be prophets, but joyfully. And thanks to all of you for making the time to be here today. And it's been a time for us to meet people we haven't seen for sometimes up to 40 years. So we are delighted that Albert has brought us together for this. Thank you very much to all of you.
Now I'm going to call on Sister Celia. Now Sister Celia is going to extinguish the candle for us.
And so I'd like to begin, before I have my prayer, just with a piece that I took from one of the contributors, Lionel Green Thompson. And when I listened to Father Perry, it all just comes together. So Lionel spoke about compassion as action, humility as practice, and justice as expression. And so as we listen to the prayer, maybe we think of that and just, or the reflection. Lionel went on to say then, how he put that in, he said, he, Albert, calls us in the modern era to listen with compassion, walk with humility, and to act with justice. I have heard his challenge that we become more socially accountable in the spaces we occupy and then join others with a similar purpose. And somehow that again fits in with what Gerald West said, see, judge, act, and continue doing it. And so in that vein, I would like to share the Canticle of Dominican Life. Teach us your ways, O God, that we will walk in truth. Teach us, O wisdom, to be Dominican disciples, contemplative proclaimers of your word. Teach us, O light, to pursue and recognize truth, to study and to value truth wherever we may find it. Teach us, O just one, to confront evil and to birth justice in our hearts and in our society. Empower us to consistently respond to the demands of the gospel, the needs of the world, and the call of the church. Empower us to love one another as you have loved us. Strengthen us to be partners in healing and hope. Empower us to be ready to give freely of our possessions and ourselves. Strengthen us to be responsible and supportive of each other. Help us to bring to life all that is best in each other. Shout out for joy, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song. For God has empowered us to life. God's life here on earth.
Strong in faith, free of doubt. Strong in faith, free of doubt. Tell all men the joyful gospel. Hallelujah. Pelotalona, itabileka ofela. Hallelujah. Pelotalona, itabileka.